Hi, my name is Jeff Kuvin, and I'm the president of the proposed American Board of Cardiovascular Medicine. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar entitled Navigating the Future of Cardiovascular Medicine Certification, a collaborative approach to creating a new cardiovascular board. I'm honored to be joined by 5 of our 15-member board of directors. Dr. Daniel Kalansky from the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Michelle Kittleson from Cedars-Sinai, Dr. Ed Fry from Ascension Healthcare, Dr. Katie Berlacher from the University of Pittsburgh, and Dr. Greg Michaud from Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Before we get started with the panel, I'd just like to make a few introductory remarks. As you know, the House of Cardiology has come together to support an application to the American Board of Medical Specialties to form a brand new independent board for cardiologists. Cardiologists governing cardiologists. There are so many reasons as to why now is the right time to do so. I'd like to just mention a few of these. First, we all know that cardiology has evolved tremendously over the past few decades and has clearly defined itself as a separate and distinct profession, different from internal medicine, with unique training programs, with evidence-based guidelines, with team-based care approaches, with competency statements. This is just to name a few. We also know that many cardiology programs across the country have separated from internal medicine for these reasons from an academic, financial, and a clinical perspective. Second, there's been considerable dissatisfaction with current approaches to certification and a recognition that a less punitive, more supportive approach to documenting continuous competency is really necessary. Third, at the same time, the ABMS has set brand new standards which focus more on a holistic approach to certification, considering all 6 competencies, and this resonates well with the concepts for a new cardiology board. And finally, as cardiologists, we need to focus on the present and our future workforce needs. And the best way to do this is to have a board focused specifically on cardiovascular medicine. So about a year ago, the 5 major cardiology societies, the ACC, the AHA, SCI, HFSA, and HRS, came together to submit an application to the ABMS for a new certification board in cardiovascular medicine. This application is still being evaluated by the ABMS, and we hope to hear more in the next few months. It's been a very interesting journey, and we hope this webinar will provide you with some updates about our board application and will highlight some of the key developments and strategies that we hope will shape the future of cardiovascular certification. Now let's move on to our panel. Dan, let's start with you. And if you could share some insights about the application process itself.
Sure, Jeff. Thanks for asking. I'm pleased to share an update on the ABCVM application process. The American Board of Medical Specialties, or the ABMS, as you mentioned, is responsible for overseeing the certification boards. And in fact, the ABMS represents 24 separate certifying boards and nearly 1 million active board-certified physicians. The ABMS has been interested in new approaches to boards and board certification. So after a great deal of consideration and working with member societies, as you mentioned, representing a large range of cardiology specialty activities, a group of leaders prepared an application for a new American Board of Cardiovascular Medicine that would be responsible for the appropriate certification of cardiologists across the spectrum of cardiac disease. A detailed application was prepared, one which emphasizes competency-based, meaningful certification experiences. And this application was reviewed in early 2024 by cardiology member societies, and the board was created with a new board of directors representing a large spectrum of our cardiology community. This application was then submitted to the ABMS, the American Board of Medical Specialties, for review, and this application was open for a 90-day period of public comment and suggestions. As you will hear, many comments were received from a great number of people, and these comments were received and were vetted by the ABMS. The ABMS then asked the ABCVM Board of Directors for clarification around some of the points of the proposals in this new application, and the board responded to the ABMS. So where are we now, Jeff? At this point, the ABMS is carefully considering the final application to determine next steps. The ABMS has their own very thoughtful and deliberative approach. We are optimistic that ABMS will find the proposal that we have submitted to be balanced and innovative and in the best interest of both our patients and our cardiology members. The anticipated timeline for a decision on this is sometime in early 2025. I think it's important to also remind all of our cardiologists that this process is going to take time. And in the interim, it's critical that all of us continue to stay certified through the ABIM, as we always have done, using whichever tools and testing methods are accepted and promoted by the ABIM. Then, once the application for a new board is accepted, an appropriate timeline will be forthcoming on when and how to transition to the new ABCVM for ongoing certification.
Great. Thanks so much, Dan. That was very helpful. And I think the last point is really important, that even if we are granted a new board, it doesn't mean that certification changes from the ABIM to this new board overnight. It's going to take time for a transition. We don't even know what that transition will look like for a transition to take place. So please, please be patient. We will be as communicative as possible through webinars like this and on our website, cvboard.org. So just stay in tune. And as Dan said, please remain certified however you are getting your certification. Michelle, what are your thoughts on the application process?
I think the most remarkable part of the application process is how much time and effort has gone into meticulously creating a vision by cardiologists for cardiologists so we can help ourselves be the best clinicians we can be and therefore help our patients. Dan outlined it so beautifully, and one of the main things to remember is it's a bit of hurry up and wait. We work really hard and now we're patient. But I think the cardiology community should be very assured that we're working as hard and as fast as we can. We're not the rate limiting step to try to get an answer on this important question.
And Ed, with this application process, we've developed a 15-member board of directors. How are those people picked and how are they representing the House of Cardiology?
Well, thanks for asking and thanks for putting this together. I think this is a very informative process and that will be very helpful, hopefully, to all of our members and diplomats. So as Dan outlined, the process started really with 5 organizations, professional societies coming together: ACC, HA, HFSA, HRS, and SCI. And the initial board was comprised of 2 representatives from each of those charter member societies. But then we spent a good deal of our time filling out the rest of the 15-person board, one being designated as representing the field of adult congenital heart disease, given that this is a current ABIM certificate within cardiovascular medicine. And then 4 additional at-large seats, which we took a lot of time to really, I think, thoughtfully go through what kind of additional input, representation, and competencies did we want and need on this new board. And one obvious area, and one where we've had a lot of ongoing discussions with the various imaging societies, was a representative from the imaging community, and really bringing them into the fold. Something that's not really represented in the current certification process there is no certification directly in imaging, and that's an important factor. Another area that was very important to tap into was the issue of training and the expertise of training program directors. Similarly, expertise with respect to educational science and certification processes. And then lastly, a public member who could bring a unique perspective to this board, the view of meeting the public obligation, which is really at the end of the day, what certification is all about, is to be able to assure the public and patients that we're really providing the best care possible for all.
Thanks. That's really helpful, Ed. And hopefully this is representing the large community of cardiologists and cardiologists really helping to govern cardiologists. So thank you very much for that. Michelle, let's move to you. And Dan mentioned that from April to July of this past year, there was a public comment period. What does that mean? And what have we learned from that public comment period?
Well, Jeff, I'm so glad you asked. So one of the most important steps in the application for the new CV board was ensuring comprehensive feedback from stakeholders, including all members of the House of Cardiology. So to that end, the American Board of Medical Specialties Advisory Board on Board Specialty Development opened a public comment period for feedback on the new CV board. It spanned 90 days, as you noted, from April through July of 2024, with the goal of providing an opportunity for public participation in this decision-making process. So all partner societies in the House of Cardiology that Ed mentioned, the ACC, AHA, HFSA, SCI, HRS, published press releases to get the word out and encourage cardiologists, other clinicians, patients, and the public, other stakeholders, to share their feedback and support for a new approach to continuous learning and competency-based certification. So the comment form consisted of 3 main questions. Do you agree with the creation of the new American Board of Cardiovascular Medicine? Does the new board meet ABMS requirements for initial certification? And does the new board meet ABMS requirements for continuous certification? So over the 90-day period, almost 1,400 responses were received. We're very grateful for that level of enthusiasm, engagement, and feedback. And the majority of the respondents had positive comments, but 90% positive. Commenters noted that that cardiology has unique needs and requires its own board. They noted that the current ABM process is expensive, it's burdensome, maybe the current examinations might be outdated. So we're very grateful for this high level of engagement. We're grateful for the positive response that supports the mission of ABCVM. We know that cardiology has evolved to encompass a wide variety of subspecialties and multidisciplinary care, and this public comment feedback truly reinforced that we can reflect the evolution of cardiology as its own distinct medical certification and specialty, and that we can be at the forefront of the field, meeting and sustaining our unique competencies. We can prioritize lifelong learning and support continuous self-improvement. So all in all, it was really a fantastic experience to engage the community.
Oh, that's great. Ed, I'm sure you read most of those 1,400 comments, and not every single one was positive. What did you learn, and how have we maybe reshaped our application or our thought process moving forward? Because a lot of the comments were very, very helpful for us to think maybe a little bit differently.
Yeah, well, maybe I need to get a life, but I actually did read all 1,400 comments, and they were very insightful. And as you suggest, they really, I think, gave us not only sort of positive feedback and a pat on the back, but I think helped focus. I think the plurality of the various comments helped us focus around competence, help us focus around making sure that this process was relevant to what we do in our day-to-day practice, and that there would be true value that would come out of this process that could be measurable in terms of the care of our patients. I think the other important, we also, I think, paid attention to the critiques as well, and that has helped us refine our message. Again, around those principles I just mentioned. There were some, I think, things that pointed to clarifications that we needed to make, both in terms of potential diplomates, but also to the ABMS and to the board itself, helping clarify what we do. So I think the comment period, although was a necessary process, has actually been very, very helpful. And I think it will continue to guide much of what we do as we are building the board going forward.
Couldn't agree more. And I think the ABMS obviously reads these comments, and they, to your point, Michelle, they've seen that there is a groundswell of support for this. I think it's also reaffirming to see that most cardiologists believe in the concept of certification. We all want to show that we are competent to our profession and to our patients. But we also want to make sure it's seamless with what we're doing, that we're getting credit for what we're doing. We're not in a situation where it's punitive and we have to sit out for a while because we missed a test question or two. We want to make it meaningful, not easier, but more meaningful for us and to show our patients and the payers and the public that we are competent clinicians. In our field of practice, by the way, you can't be perfect in everything, but you should be competent in your field of practice. So I think, as both of you have said very eloquently, it was a learning experience, but I think it helped us as a board really move forward with concepts that we know are important to these 1,400 and presumably to the rest of the cardiologists out there. So Ed, let's change the topic a little bit and tell us what the board's been doing while we're in this waiting period and what this waiting period is really all about.
Well, probably simply put is we've been building the plane while we're flying it. And that's a good analogy. I would also emphasize what we've been doing too, what I think everybody has mentioned. We're staying current with our certification because that obviously is very important until we have an affirmation that we're moving forward with a new board. So we're all paying attention to that. But operationally, we're meeting on a monthly basis. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, we've filled out our board and through a careful discernment process. We've been meeting with ABMS to answer their questions and for us to ask questions of them in terms of the process and to help refine things. I think it's important to remember that the ABMS has not adopted a new board for more than 30 years. And in fact, we had to wait a little bit for our application for the ABMS to complete the revision of their new board application process. So I think they are learning at the same time that we are learning in this process as well. We're building out the organizational infrastructure. We have tremendous staff support being supplied by the charter medical societies that have been really helpful in terms of getting things done in a timely fashion. We've discussed and developed policies around governance. We've created operational committees. We have committees that will advise the board with respect to the content around competence and the educational science pieces. But I think it's also important to say what we've been doing during this period of time, and tonight's program, I think, reflects this, is to talk with multiple stakeholders and to listen, to learn from them, and to assimilate that information as we build out the board and hopefully prepare for launching of a new CV certifying board.
Great, great. Katie, how about your perspective on what's been going on behind the scenes while we're in this waiting period?
Great question. And Ed really put it nicely. I think there's a lot of operations already occurring. We have all 15 of us have split into some smaller working groups based on our expertise and our interest, not only from an operations standpoint, but there's a lot of things to think about when we think about how this is all going to be implemented. So it's things like how we are going to use an operating technology, what the finances of the board are going to be, understanding certification and how that will change with the new board, a lot of the communications and relations and discussions with all of our partners. I think one of the things that I have tried to do on a regular basis is just speak to the people that I work with on a regular basis, speak to the people that I see at meetings or those that are on social media and interacting with them, not only reminding them to stay present in their current certifications, but to learn about what the process is, where we are, and to stay engaged.
No, really well put. And remember, there are two major parts here for certification. There's initial certification in cardiology or one of the subspecialty areas. And then there is the whole continuous certification process, which is really the lifelong learning part of what we're all going through on a daily basis. So it is complicated. We've learned that. And we want to make sure that we get it right, but that we also are flexible and we make this an iterative process that we can change. We can change with the times, we can change with technology, we can change how information is being shared. So there's a lot of opportunities to bring in new concepts and that really leads me to my next question, Katie. You're an expert educator. Tell us a little bit about some concepts that maybe have been forgotten in previous iterations of certification that you think we should employ that are adult learning concepts that are really important.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, so I have to be careful. You can cut me off because I think, too few of us understand the learning science and adult learning principles, despite the fact that we've been training as adults for a very long time since medical school. And so some of the things that I like to remind colleagues of is that adults really desire to be self-directed. Unlike small children, we know exactly what it is that we need to know in order to practice to serve our patients. We often like to learn from experience, to learn by doing instead of only by reading or hearing. We also really need to learn things that are not only relevant to our practice on a daily basis, but also immediately applicable. And so when we think about those things and take that into mind as we form this new board and think about certification, our goal really as members of the board has been to say, how do we remain learner-centered when we think about the delivery of certification and what we are going to do, keeping all of those principles in mind and our learner in the forefront of those things. We think about, how can we best do this so that we don't waste learners' times, but that we also improve learners' knowledge. And so some of those things really come to cause us to ask ourselves, what's the point of testing, right? And I think you did say this, Jeff, that really for many years, and all of us can think back to taking steps and boards and getting into medical school, we will remember testing in those periods of our life as punitive. And still, oftentimes, when we are doing certification and recertification, think about testing as punitive. And our hope, I think I speak for the rest of the board, is that we will use testing in the future as a way to find our gaps of knowledge so that we can fill those, so that when we see our patients, we can serve them with the best knowledge that medicine and really cardiology has. So I will turn it back to you and see what others think, but really fingers crossed that we can apply this learning science to the certification of the new board.
Great. Greg, does that resonate with you? You're an electrophysiologist. When you think about how you learn best, how do you think this fits into a new board?
Fantastic. I think what Katie said is really important. She's really an expert in this field, and we're going to lean on her heavily going forward. But the other thing is we're a varied specialty. I'm a proceduralist. I'm in the EP lab 4 days a week doing procedures. So, as cardiologists, these are things we can think about going forward. Competence for procedural specialties is a little different, perhaps, than other parts of cardiology. So I think the fact that the whole house of cardiology will be involved in this and being able to think about all of our relevant subspecialties within cardiology will be really important and really valuable. And I think our audience today will see that relevance of having the house of cardiology responsible for certification, both initial and ongoing.
And Katie, I'm sure you would agree that not every adult learner learns the same way. So there have to be adaptive ways of understanding how individuals learn, and also how you want to make sure that what you're learning is applicable to your practice. What I need to know as a general cardiologist is very different than what Greg needs to know as an electrophysiologist, very different from what Michelle needs to know as a heart failure doctor. So we really need to, if I'm not mistaken, hone in on practice-specific competencies and not forget that competencies are much more than just what I know as medical knowledge. It's how I actually act as a physician, how I act as a professional, how I participate in systems-based practice, how I communicate, all these things that we do every day. And by the way, we're being assessed every day by our patients, by many people. That needs to be part of the mix in saying, you know what, this physician is competent, or maybe this physician needs to get remedial work in specific areas.
And I think if I can just add one thing to that, there's 2 points that you said that I want to draw out. And one is that we are doing a lot of this already. Those competencies that are outside of just medical knowledge, the professionalism, the communication, the problem-based learning, the systems-based practice, All of those things are things that we're doing on a regular basis, but we're not getting credit for because they are hard to quantify. And so the challenge for us as a board and for us when we think about those certifications is to quantify the things that we do on a regular basis and give our members and our diplomats credit for that. And the second thing that is future looking is the technology. And as you said, there's a lot that is being developed in this area when we think about how artificial intelligence will change the way that we do testing, will change the way that we judge competencies and certification. We are doing a lot of that learning and background planning so that that technology will be available when it is ready and for prime time for us as certifiers.
Katie, if I can just pick up on that, you said a lot of things that are really important. One is that we keep hearing from our members that they do want to get credit for the types of learning and the types of activities that they're doing on an everyday basis. And our members, all of our cardiologists, are learning new techniques and new findings on a very regular basis. Greg in the EP lab is doing things that for sure he wasn't doing 5 years ago. And so how do we get credit for that, make sure we're up to speed on it, make this better for our patients, and incorporate that into our learning and testing and certifying modules. So that's really an exciting approach. And it obviously also, the other theme here is just how wide our net is. And so this spans everything from, as you heard, ACHD to imaging to interventional and heart failure and all the other subspecialties that we have. So it's a very broad net that we're casting, and our members have said, try to be broad and try to incorporate what we're doing already in your learning modules.
So Greg, let's turn to you, and I'm going to ask you the million-dollar question. What does certification look like in the future? What are we talking about? And broad strokes, obviously.
Well, I think a little bit depends on what the ABMS decides concerning our application. So we've applied to become completely autonomous from the ABIM as a board to handle both initial and ongoing certification. But counter proposals from the ABMS could include asking us to handle, say, ongoing certification, and ABIM continue to do initial, and there may be a transition period to complete autonomy. They could ask for co-boards. We don't think that's likely outcome of our application, but it's something we just don't know yet. We're not the ones making those decisions. We've made our case, and now we're waiting to hear the outcome. But our hope is that we'll become a completely autonomous board, and all of these great ideas that we're letting you know about tonight, we have control. And that's really going to be the key, that, if we're a completely autonomous board, we will have control over what initial and ongoing certification looks like in the future. I think initially the 5 current cardiovascular certifications we would focus on, and then there are plenty of other certifications that we can look at and incorporate into the initial and ongoing certification process, like imaging, vascular medicine, cardio-onc. There's a bunch of things that obviously other specialties within cardiology other than those 5 current cardiovascular certifications. If you just want to take a step back and think about what are the advantages to the cardiovascular board, I think, if you look at our website, we sort of have 3 principles. One is that we are specialized, and so specialized that we are now distinct from internal medicine as a specialty, and feel like that we deserve a board that really best represents us. That we want to be relevant to your practice. I think that's been a big complaint over years, that these tests we're taking, do I need to look at, if I can Google it, do I need to know it on an exam? Probably not, right? I mean, that's not important. You need concepts, you need to show that you're competent, not that you remember some obscure gene. So being relevant, we're focusing on safety, quality, and value from both the physician's perspective and from the patient perspective, because we're there to protect patients. That's part of our mission. And then that the process is continuous. It's not every 5 years rushing to kind of get a bunch of things done and realize that you hadn't done these areas of competence. And we want to make it easy. So that's another important goal of ours, is not to make it an onerous thing, but that maybe you'll even look forward to some of the process and learning some things and identifying your gaps and then filling them. Again, we've said this a million times, but please don't let your certification lapse. However you're doing it now, continue that pathway. Hopefully, down the road, we will have a different process, but don't let it lapse, because we don't have any way of potentially bringing you back in the fold. We can't guarantee that. That's certainly, if you let it lapse, there's no process in place to bring you back. So please don't let that happen.
Thanks so much, Greg. Dan, comments on the future of certification?
Yeah, thanks. That was a great summary from Greg, and I think it's really exciting. This is a once in a medical generation change for our cardiologists here. We've been certifying with one organization in one way for a long time. It's gone well, but we have gotten bigger and bigger, and it's evolved, and it's going to continue to evolve. And I think that's also part of what this board is about, and what the comment period was about, was to be sure that we were inclusive. And so we are trying to be inclusive of all of us who are part of cardiology from across the many specialties. So I think it's very exciting. I think we'll see an evolution. We need to keep our certifications current, as you've heard, and we will work with ABMS to, once approved, to figure out the right timeline and the right transition, and then really focus on educating our members about how to do it, how to become part of this new board, how to get certified and stay certified, and then to learn from our members and see what they like, and to learn from our educators and see how we can best incorporate some of those ideas that Katie and so many others have been telling us about, how to improve our certification process. So I think, again, it really is a once in a generation opportunity for us.
Couldn't agree more. Now, remember, we're doing this under the umbrella of the American Board of Medical Specialties. The ABMS has 24 boards, of which the ABIM is the largest. We are trying to be the 25th board, but we're doing it with the ABMS for many, many reasons. Most importantly is the ABMS is the recognized certifier in the United States, recognized by our hospitals, by our practices, by our payers, by our patients. So when we think about the future of cardiovascular certification, we just can't say, oh, we'll just do whatever we want. We need to do things relative to the new standards that were just published by the ABMS, and everything we are proposing actually meets these standards. Interestingly, you don't need to take a closed book examination to be certified with the new standards. So we need to think differently than we've been taught in the past. And as Greg said, we're just trying to think about the beginnings right now with the 5 certifications, but we have a whole world of cardiology that we need to support and represent moving forward. So really, really insightful comments by this group. Before we end, any closing comments from any of our board members?
Jeff, I would just emphasize, I think what everybody had said. I think there are 3 major take-home messages in terms of this process. First and foremost is that we are focusing on a constructive process, and maybe in the past it was a punitive process, but as Katie outlined, really to help identify gaps and help cardiovascular professionals to be better at what they do. Secondly, to focus on competence as opposed to rote knowledge. And lastly, to focus on value. And value is a broad term. It means not only value to the patient in terms of the product that then certified cardiologists can deliver, but also value to the diplomates in terms of keeping this process as efficient, both in terms of time and, importantly, in terms of cost. This has been a big focus of what we've been focusing on now. And then I think underlying all of this, and I think everybody on the panel has said this tonight, it's so important that this is really all about the patient and all about making sure that the patient receives the best care possible based on the best process of maintaining competence and the best way of fulfilling those knowledge gaps. So I've learned a lot from all my colleagues tonight, as I have in this process going on, and I'm very excited to see this move forward. And I think the diplomates can trust that this group and the staff who are supporting us are working at full tilt to try and make this happen, and look forward to seeing where we go.
Jeff, the only thing that I'll add is that all of us that serve on the board and have been involved in this process really want to answer questions and be available to the rest of our field. And so if there's something that we didn't say tonight or that you want us to speak about more, feel free to contact any of us, to pull us aside, to bring us to your group or your location to talk about these things, to answer questions and get in front of your colleagues, your groups, so that everybody feels comfortable with these decisions. I strongly believe that we are better together as a field, and that will create a really bright future that has a lot more innovation for ourselves, but also a better health for our patients.
Really, really great. Well, I want to thank all of you for your great insight and your commitment to the board, and also thank the other members of our board of directors and our amazing staff who's been working on this really tirelessly. So what we have to say to you is please stay tuned. Please stay tuned for further updates on our new board. As mentioned, we anticipate hearing something from the ABMS in early 2025. We're going to keep you informed as much as possible. So please go to our website, cvboard.org, for more information, including a whole list of FAQs that should be helpful, and communicate with us your thoughts, your concerns. In the meantime, as we keep saying over and over, please do whatever you're supposed to do to maintain your certification, whether it's the LKA or the CMP or taking a 10-year examination. You need to really maintain your good standing. So if and when there is a transition to a new board, it should be seamless. Thanks for joining this webinar. We continue to keep you informed, and we hope for some good news in the near future. Thanks so much.